The first sound Eli Carter ever made was silence. The doctor's hands froze midair, waiting for the newborn cry that never came. The monitors beeped. The mother's breath hitched. Then the doctor turned, forced a smile, and said the words that changed everything. "He's alive. Just quiet." From that moment, quiet became his curse. At 6 months, his parents, Nora and Paul Carter, had already stopped cooing over him. At 1 year, his father called him the broken one. By 2, Nora couldn't stand to take him to the park. Other mothers whispered. Other children stared. Every noise in the world reminded them of the one he couldn't make. When he turned 3, doctors confirmed what his parents had already decided. Eli would never speak. The diagnosis came with a term that sounded clinical but felt like a sentence: congenital vocal cord paralysis. Paul didn't hear the science. He only heard defective. That night, Paul poured whiskey into his coffee and said without looking up, "Maybe God wanted quiet." Nora stared at the floor. Maybe God wanted cruel. Eli grew in the space between those sentences. He learned early that communication had to live in motion: the curl of fingers, the blink of eyes, the tilt of a head. He mimicked cartoons silently, lips forming words no one heard. He tried laughter once, but no sound came, only breath. His mother flinched like he'd coughed in church. At 5, he started drawing. Crayons at first, then pencils, then pens stolen from his father's desk. Every page became a voice. Circles turned to faces, lines turned to machines. He drew doorways that opened to nowhere, towers powered by light. Nora glanced once, said, "Pretty," and never looked again. School was louder than home. Children learned fast that Eli's silence was easy to weaponize. They made up stories that he was cursed or dumb or dangerous. One boy mimed choking every time he passed. Another once held Eli's throat and whispered, "Say something." Eli didn't fight back. He stared steady until the boy dropped his hand. That was the first time a teacher noticed him. Not for grades, not for voice, but for the unsettling calm that never cracked. He began keeping notebooks. Not diaries, not fantasies, blueprints. Circuits and engines, ideas drawn in the margins of math homework. His teachers thought he copied from somewhere. He hadn't. Each line came from the silence that filled him. By 10, the house grew smaller. Paul stopped coming home early. Nora stopped speaking altogether. The only time Eli saw their eyes soften was when they looked at his younger sister, June, loud, perfect, everything he wasn't. One night, June found him in the dark hallway, sketching by flashlight. "You're weird," she whispered. He smiled, drew a smiley face on her palm. She giggled. "Don't tell Mom," she said. He nodded, sealing another secret in silence. A week later, their father found the drawings under Eli's bed. Pages of strange machines labeled in handwriting too precise for a child. He flipped through them, face tightening with each turn. "You think you're smarter than me?" he growled. "You think pictures make up for words?" Eli shook his head, tried to reach for the notebook. The slap came fast, the paper scattering across the floor. "You're not normal," Paul said. "Stop pretending to be something you're not." That night, Eli gathered the torn pages, taped them together, and hid them inside an old shoebox beneath the floorboard. He didn't cry. He'd learned that even tears made noise. At school, a counselor tried to teach him sign language, but there was no funding, no patience. "Maybe he'll outgrow it," she told his mother. Nora's reply was a tired shrug. "Maybe he won't." Every sound in the classroom became a wall. Laughter, pencils tapping, sneakers squeaking. Eli lived behind it, building cities in silence. By 12, he'd stopped trying to belong. Words belonged to others. Creation belonged to him. One winter afternoon, the school held a talent fair. Kids sang, danced, recited poems. Eli stood backstage, clutching a small cardboard model. His invention, a lamp that ran on hand motion instead of batteries. When his turn came, he walked out, heart steady. No voice, no speech, just light. He waved his hand over the lamp. The bulb flickered, then glowed bright gold. Gasps rippled through the crowd. A teacher whispered, "How?" He bowed silently and left. That night, he placed the lamp beside his bed. For the first time, he didn't feel mute. He felt understood. But the next morning, the lamp was gone. His father's voice thundered from the kitchen. "You're wasting time with this junk." Eli ran downstairs, saw the lamp in pieces in the trash. His drawings burned in the sink. "It's over," Paul said. "No more fantasies." Eli stood frozen, the smoke filling the air, his notebooks turning to ash. His father waited for reaction, for sound. None came. Eli only stared until Paul looked away. In that silence, something inside him shifted. Not anger, not grief. Promise. If the world refused his voice, he would make one they couldn't ignore. That night, he tore open a new notebook and began again. Page 1. Design for light that never dies. Outside, snow fell soundlessly against the window, the only sound that ever felt like his own. The first time Eli Carter learned what cruelty sounded like. It echoed through a hallway lined with lockers. He was 13, small for his age, hands full of notebooks. The bell rang, a flood of sneakers hit the floor, and the laughter started like thunder rolling closer. "Hey, silent movie," one boy yelled. "Got any words today?" Eli kept walking. He had mastered that look of distance, eyes forward, shoulders still. He'd learned that reacting fed the noise, but they always wanted a show. A girl blocked his path, holding a fake microphone made from a pen. "Breaking news," she shouted. "Local freak refuses to speak." The hallway erupted. Books hit the floor. Someone clapped sarcastically. Eli stooped to pick up his notes, but a sneaker pressed down on one of the pages. He looked up into the smirking face of Liam Hayes, the biggest boy in school. "Say something," Liam said. "Anything. Bark if you want." Eli stared at the shoe on his paper, then lifted his gaze. Calm, steady. The kind of silence that made even Liam flinch for a second. But only a second. "What's that look?" Liam sneered. "You judging me?" He shoved Eli against the locker. "You think you're better than us?" The teacher on hallway duty looked up from her phone, sighed, and walked away. Eli gathered his papers, the laughter still chasing him down the hall. When he reached the stairwell, he sat on the bottom step, opened his notebook, and drew. Not the bullies, not revenge, just lines, arcs, ideas. Machines that turn sound into light. He wrote a note beneath the sketch. "If they won't hear me, they'll see me." That afternoon he came home with a torn sleeve and no voice to explain. His mother noticed the rip but not the bruise. "Did you fall?" she asked, distracted by her phone. He nodded. Easier than trying to tell the truth with gestures she never watched long enough to understand. Dinner was silent except for the clatter of forks. His father barely looked up. "He needs a job," Paul said. "A voice doesn't pay bills." "He's 13, Nora replied. "Then he's late." Eli ate quietly, watching steam rise from his soup, the only thing in the house that moved freely. That night he sat by the window drawing again, sketching shapes he didn't understand yet. Things with wings, things that glowed. Outside, laughter from teenagers echoed through the street. He pressed his pencil harder, turning sound into structure. At school the next week, art class became his sanctuary. The teacher, Miss Carver, saw what others ignored. "You don't just draw," she said softly one afternoon. "You build." She lifted his paper. A design of an entire city powered by light towers. "Where did this come from?" Eli shrugged. She smiled. "You don't have to tell me. Just don't stop." For a while, that small kindness became enough. He worked through lunch, through noise, through the daily gauntlet of whispers. Every notebook filled with visions of machines that could replace his voice. But peace in school never lasted long. One morning, someone found his sketchbook and passed it around. By the third period, the whole class was laughing over his designs. "Look," one boy jeered. "He's building a spaceship for his imaginary friends." Another chimed in. "Maybe he'll finally talk to aliens." They tore pages, crumpled them, tossed them in the air like confetti. Miss Carver tried to stop them, but Eli was already gone. He ran through the hallway until he reached the janitor's closet. Locked. He slid down the wall, knees to his chest. For the first time in years, the silence hurt. It wasn't peaceful anymore. It was heavy, full of swallowed screams. When he finally stood, his reflection stared back from a mop bucket. Eyes red, jaw set. The boy in the water didn't look broken. He looked waiting. That evening he didn't draw. He sat with a blank page for hours. Then slowly he wrote a single sentence at the bottom. "Silence is not weakness. It's fuel." The next day he went back to class like nothing had happened. The laughter continued, but something had shifted. He didn't flinch now. He watched. He learned. He memorized the rhythm of cruelty, the way it echoed, the way it could be predicted. He started sketching something new, not machines this time but people. He studied faces, body language, motion. If he couldn't speak, he could read. If he couldn't shout, he could see. By 14, he could tell when someone was lying by their eyes alone. It became his secret armor. One afternoon Liam cornered him again. Still nothing to say? Eli looked straight at him, gaze calm. He raised his notebook, flipped to a page with a small mechanical diagram, and pointed to a line of text beneath it. Liam frowned, reading aloud. Even a whisper can start a storm. What's that supposed to mean? Eli smiled just barely and walked away. For the first time, the laughter didn't follow him. That night he lay awake staring at the ceiling, hearing the echo of that sentence in his head. Even a whisper can start a storm. He didn't know yet that it would one day save a city and destroy everything he'd ever known. For now, it was just a thought scribbled on paper, born in the middle of a hallway that had tried to crush him. He didn't need to speak it aloud. The silence already roared. Chapter 3: The Notebooks. The notebooks began as paper and turned into purpose. Eli Carter filled his first one the year he turned 15. It wasn't a diary. It was blueprints written in silence. Mechanical hearts, bridges of light, strange machines that lived only in pencil and patience. He hid them under his bed, stacked like bricks of an invisible future. The world outside never changed. His father's shouting, his mother's tired sighs, June's laughter echoing from another room. It was all noise he couldn't answer. But when he drew, the noise disappeared. Every line obeyed him. Every page listened. He scavenged parts from dumpsters behind repair shops, broken fans, old radios, wires. The junkyard became his laboratory. The owner, a thick-armed man named Morales, once caught him digging through scrap and asked, "You stealing, kid?" Eli shook his head, held up a rusted motor and mouthed, "Fixing." Morales raised an eyebrow. "Can you?" Eli nodded. 10 minutes later, the motor hummed again. The man laughed. "You've got magic hands, boy. Come by when you need parts. Just don't blow yourself up." That scrap became gold. By 16, Eli's room was a maze of wires and sketches pinned to the walls, circuits drawn like constellations. He communicated through notes now, quick scribbles that said more than most conversations. "Need solder. Test complete." Almost light. School didn't get easier, but he stopped caring. Miss Carver still checked in. "You're going to do something big, aren't you?" she said one afternoon. He smiled. She didn't know how literal she was. When his parents argued about money, he disappeared to the basement. There, on a wooden table scarred with burn marks, he worked on his latest project. A portable energy cell that turned movement into power. He imagined people waving their hands to light homes, walking streets that glowed from footsteps. He called it the silent current. Nights stretched into mornings. He forgot to eat. When he finally tested it, the bulb flickered, then stayed lit. Tiny miracle. He grinned for the first time in months. It worked. He wanted to show someone, anyone, but there was no one left to show. Paul had stopped speaking to him except in orders. "Do something useful," his father said. Nora barely looked up from dishes. June was away at camp. So Eli packed his invention in a shoebox and carried it to the school science fair. The gym buzzed with noise and color. Kids shouting over projects, parents cheering, teachers pretending to be impressed. Eli found a corner table and set up his device. He wrote on a cardboard sign, "Motion-powered lamp." Underneath, smaller. No batteries. No fuel. Only movement. First, nobody stopped. Then a boy waved his hand over the sensor. The bulb bloomed gold. The crowd gasped. "Do it again," someone yelled. The boy waved. Light flared brighter. Teachers gathered. Judges took notes. Someone filmed on a phone. When the results were announced, Eli's name echoed through the speakers. First place, Eli Carter. He didn't need the applause. The light was enough. Afterward, Miss Carver hugged him. "You proved silence can shine," she whispered. He wrote on a scrap, "Light doesn't need sound." She smiled through tears. "Neither do you." That night he came home clutching the ribbon. His father waited at the kitchen table, expression unreadable. You skip chores for this, he said. Eli held up the lamp. Paul stared at it, unimpressed. Another toy? Nora murmured. Paul, look, it's beautiful. He slammed his hand on the table. Beautiful doesn't pay bills. Eli flinched. The lamp trembled in his grip. Go to your room, Paul said. I'm done watching you waste time. Upstairs, Eli placed the lamp on his desk, turned it on and watched light fill the room. He scribbled one line in his notebook. Someday even you'll need this. He didn't know how true that would become. The next week, he caught Morales watching him work at the junkyard. You ever sell these ideas? The man asked. Eli shrugged. Maybe you should. The world could use some quiet light. But the world wasn't ready. Not yet. One stormy night, the basement flooded. Eli rushed downstairs trying to save his notebooks. The water rose fast, ink bleeding into black rivers. He stacked boxes on the table, clutching what he could. Thunder cracked overhead, shaking the house. Paul appeared at the top of the stairs, drunk and angry. You flooded the damn place. Eli pointed to the ceiling, mouthed, Rain. Don't give me excuses. His father grabbed a box from the table. What's this junk? Eli lunged, shaking his head, pleading silently. Paul ripped it open. Pages spilled out, soaked and torn. All this time you could have worked and instead you draw dreams. Eli tried to take them back. The shove came sudden, hard. His head hit the steps. The world tilted, blurred. He heard nothing, only saw the lamp fall, spark die. When he woke, the basement was empty. His notebooks were gone. For 2 days he searched every corner, even the trash. Nothing. His father said, I burned them. Time to grow up. That night Eli didn't sleep. He sat in the dark, eyes fixed on the scorched mark where the lamp had fallen. His silence wasn't calm anymore, it was war. At dawn, he opened a new notebook, drew a single line of light across the page, and wrote beneath it, They can burn paper. They can't burn ideas. The night the fire began, the world was already burning inside him. It started as an argument, louder than usual, crueler than most. Paul Carter had found another notebook. This one, unlike the others, wasn't about light. It was about escape. Eli had drawn a blueprint of a city where silence ruled. A world without shouting, without blame. He called it Haven. His father saw it as mockery. You think you're too good for this house? Paul roared. Too good for me? Eli shook his head, hands raised. He tried to write something, but Paul slapped the notebook away. Pages fluttered across the floor like frightened birds. You don't get to dream, his father shouted. You don't get to hide from what you are. Nora stood in the doorway, arms folded tight. Paul, stop. He's wasting his life. She looked at their son, his small frame, his trembling fingers, the bruise already forming on his cheek, and whispered, He's the only one here not wasting it. The words landed like sparks. Paul's face twisted. You always take his side. He's a child, she said. No, Paul snarled. He's a curse. Eli stepped back, bumping the lamp. It toppled. The bulb burst. The cord hissed. Then came the smell, sharp, electric, angry. Paul grabbed his jacket. Clean it up, he barked. I'm done. He slammed the door hard enough to shake the walls. For a long time, only the sound of rain filled the house. Nora knelt, gathering the torn pages. I'm sorry, she murmured. I should have stopped him sooner. Eli helped her pick them up, hands shaking. Together, they stacked the pages on the table. She smiled faintly. Someday they'll see what you are. He wanted to write, What am I? But before he could, thunder rattled the windows. The lights flickered. He turned toward the basement door. Smoke curled out from beneath it. Nora froze. Eli. He ran before she finished, racing down the stairs 2 at a time. The smell hit first, burning plastic, paper, insulation. Sparks danced across the floor where water had leaked onto live wires. The outlet glowed like a dying star. His father's cigarette, dropped earlier near the fuse box, had found a home. Flames licked the old table, spreading fast through the soaked cardboard. His notebooks, the ones he'd hidden after last week's fight, were catching. Eli grabbed the nearest pile, trying to smother the fire with his jacket. The heat seared his hands. He coughed but made no sound. Smoke clawed at his throat, mocking him with the silence he could never break. Upstairs, his mother shouted his name, voice breaking. Eli, get out. He turned toward the stairs. The railing was already glowing red. He bolted back, eyes scanning for another way. The basement window, small, high, barely wide enough. He dragged a chair under it, clutching the least burned notebook. Flames climbed the walls. His drawings curled into ghosts. He pressed the book to his chest and climbed. The metal frame burned his fingers, but he didn't stop. He kicked out the glass and squeezed through, scraping skin, tasting rain and smoke. He fell hard onto the wet grass outside. The notebook landed beside him. Above, orange light pulsed through the window like a living thing. Neighbors shouted. Someone called 911. Sirens grew near. Nora stumbled out the front door, coughing, barefoot. Where's Eli? He waved weakly from the yard. She ran to him, wrapped him in a soaked blanket. His skin was red, his eyes wild, but he clutched that notebook as if it held his heartbeat. Firefighters arrived, shouting through masks. One knelt beside him. You're lucky, kid. Another minute and... He stopped when he realized the boy couldn't answer. You're mute. Eli nodded once. The man squeezed his shoulder. You've got more courage than most who scream. They carried Nora to an ambulance. Paul appeared down the street, staggering toward the scene, rain plastering his hair. What happened? He slurred. Nora's voice cracked. You happened. He stopped dead as the house exploded into full flame. Windows shattered, spraying glass across the lawn. Eli watched it burn. His drawings, his lamp, his childhood. Gone. Yet somewhere beneath the ash, something else had survived. The fire hadn't taken everything. The notebook in his hands was scorched but intact. He turned its first page. The ink had blurred into rivers, but one phrase still shone through the smoke stains. Light that never dies. He held it close as they loaded him into the ambulance. The world outside blurred into sirens and rain. At the hospital, nurses cleaned his hands and wrapped his arms in bandages. Nora sat beside him, her eyes distant, lips trembling. You saved yourself, she whispered. He reached for a pen and wrote, and what's left of us? She looked at him for a long time. Maybe nothing, she said. But maybe that's where something new begins. He nodded, then pointed to the notebook. She touched it gently, as if it might shatter. Keep it, she said. Even if you never build what's inside, keep it. He didn't sleep that night. He lay awake listening to the hum of hospital machines, their rhythm steady, alive. For the first time he realized silence didn't have to be empty. It could hold everything worth hearing. When morning came, the fire was out, the house gone, the past turned to soot. A social worker entered, clipboard in hand. Eli Carter, she asked softly. Your mother's resting. Your father's unavailable. We'll find you a place for now. He didn't protest. He just opened his notebook and drew. A circle. A spark. A home rebuilt from light. The social worker watched, puzzled. What are you drawing? He looked up, eyes calm, and wrote one word on the paper's edge, tomorrow. Outside, the sun rose through the smoke, turning the sky gold. The city was waking, unaware that somewhere inside a hospital room, a boy with burned hands was sketching the beginning of everything. The world thought it had taken his voice. It had only forged his purpose. 3 days after the fire, Eli Carter was transferred to St. Helena's Children's Home, a place that looked safe from the outside but sounded like every broken promise inside. Metal beds, pale walls, and the faint hum of fluorescent lights that buzzed like tired bees. No one called it home. They just called it the place. He arrived with a single possession, the half-burned notebook clutched against his chest like armor. A nurse tried to take it. We'll keep that safe for you, sweetheart. He shook his head so hard the bandages on his arms slipped. The nurse sighed. Fine. Keep your treasure. They gave him a cot in the corner. Kids stared at him, whispering. That's the mute one, someone said. The fire kid. He pretended not to hear. Pretending was easier than caring. Days turned into a routine. Wake up, clean up, chores, meals. He ate fast and quiet. Nights, when the lights went out, he drew under the blanket with a pencil stub, the flame of an old memory guiding him. He didn't know someone was watching. Her name was Evelyn Hart, a volunteer who came twice a week to teach art therapy. She noticed him on her second visit, a thin boy sketching without pause while the others threw crayons. She walked over, knelt beside him, and saw the burnt edges of the notebook. "What's this?" she asked softly. He looked up but said nothing. "Can I see?" He hesitated, then opened a page. It showed towers of light wired through a city grid, elegant, impossible. Evelyn's eyes widened. "You drew this?" He nodded once. "These are incredible." She turned more pages, mechanical diagrams, energy transfers, entire cities powered by motion. "How did you?" She stopped. He was already drawing again. That night, Evelyn spoke to the head of the home. "That boy's gifted. These aren't doodles, they're engineering blueprints." The director sighed. "All our kids are gifted in something. Doesn't mean the world cares." Evelyn leaned forward. "Then maybe it's time it should." She made copies of a few pages, with permission only from his silence, and sent them to a friend who worked at an urban tech lab. She didn't expect an answer. But a week later the lab called back. "These designs, whoever drew them understands power flow at an advanced level. We thought it was AI generated until we tested one." "Tested one?" she asked. "The kinetic light model. We built a prototype. It works." The words hit like lightning. Evelyn drove to the home that night. She found Eli alone in the classroom, repairing a broken clock with parts from an old fan. The tick returned under his fingers. "You fixed it," she said, half amazed, half proud. He smiled faintly. "I need to show you something," she said. She spread photos across the desk. A glowing model of his lamp rebuilt, alive again. The light looked just like the one he'd lost. He froze. His pencil slipped. She spoke softly, carefully. "They built your idea, Eli. It worked." His eyes filled before he could look away. She placed a hand on his shoulder. "The world finally heard you." News spread faster than fire. Within a week, the story of the silent inventor hit local headlines. Mute Teen's invention could change energy forever. Cameras showed up outside the home. Evelyn shielded him as best she could, but reporters swarmed. He hated the flashbulbs, the noise, the questions. They called his silence mysterious. They called his scars inspiring. They didn't understand that both were just survival. A reporter asked Evelyn, "What drives him?" She looked at Eli, who was sketching quietly in the corner, and said, "The need to make something good out of pain." Soon the city council invited them for a demonstration. In a cold conference hall filled with men in suits, Evelyn stood beside him at a table. The prototype, a motion-powered light grid, sat between them. The mayor said, "Go ahead, son. Show us." Eli raised a hand and waved once over the sensor. Light burst across the grid, spreading through tubes like veins of gold. Gasps filled the room. One councilman whispered, "Imagine every streetlight powered by footsteps." Another said, "He's solved the blackout problem." Applause broke out. Cameras flashed again. Eli bowed his head, overwhelmed. Later in the hallway, Evelyn squeezed his hand. "You did it." He wrote on a scrap of paper, "They'll still forget me." She shook her head. "Not this time. But fame isn't gentle. It bites the hand that feeds it." By morning, news vans blocked the home. Emails poured in. Investors. Reporters. One name in the inbox froze Evelyn's breath. He'd seen the headline. He wanted to meet his son. She confronted him in the parking lot the next day. A man thinner, angrier, reeking of guilt. "You left him," she said. "He's my blood," he replied. "You can't change that." "Blood didn't keep him alive," she said. "Courage did." But Paul wasn't leaving. He filed a petition for guardianship, claiming Eli's success as family property. "He's a minor," he told the court. "I just want what's best." Eli sat through the hearing without a word. Lawyers argued over him like a prize. Evelyn stood beside him, fists tight. When the judge finally asked if the boy wished to speak, the courtroom went still. He stood, trembling, and wrote on the chalkboard behind him, "My voice is in what I build. Let it belong to the world, not to me." The judge read it twice, eyes glassy. "Petition denied," he said. Outside the courthouse, cameras swarmed again. Paul shouted something about betrayal, about stolen ideas. Eli just turned away, clutching his notebook. That night, Evelyn found him on the roof of the home, staring at the stars. "Are you okay?" He wrote. "He burned my world. Now he wants its light, she whispered. Then don't let him dim it. He smiled weakly and opened his notebook again. A new design filled the page, taller, brighter, stronger. Beneath it he wrote, "Light that never dies." The city below glowed faintly with his invention, one lamp at a time. For the first time, the silence around him didn't feel heavy. It felt full. Somewhere deep down he understood. The world had finally seen him. But the price of being seen was just beginning. The first time the city went dark, it was midnight. A power surge took out half of downtown streetlights, hospitals, traffic grids. Panic spread faster than reason. But in one forgotten district, the lights didn't die. They flickered, dimmed, then held steady, powered not by wires but by footsteps. Eli Carter's invention had finally come alive. The city called it the kinetic grid. The papers called him the boy who lit the night. He watched it all from a hospital rooftop beside Evelyn Hart. They'd been invited to the unveiling ceremony, but he'd chosen the view instead of the stage. The glow below rippled like a living heartbeat, warm, gold, and silent. Evelyn smiled at him. "They used your design, every detail." He nodded, writing on a small notepad. "Light belongs to everyone." She touched his shoulder. "It's okay to be proud." He wrote again. "Pride burns too easily." Down on the street, crowds gathered. Phones filmed the miracle. Every step they took powered the lamps that lined the boulevard. Each one a soft pulse of motion turned into energy. Kids danced just to watch the lights brighten. Taxi drivers honked in celebration. For once, the noise didn't feel cruel. It felt alive. The mayor gave a speech on the steps of City Hall. "Tonight, we see what innovation and compassion can do when given a chance. This technology will light our city, and maybe the world." Cameras flashed, and somewhere, Paul Carter watched from the edge of the crowd, unseen. His son's name echoed through loudspeakers while he stood in shadow. The face that once shouted curse now wore regret too heavy to carry. At dawn, Evelyn and Eli walked the lit streets together. The lamps dimmed as traffic thinned. "You changed everything," she whispered. He scribbled, "It's not change if it doesn't reach the dark places." She understood. The home was still full of kids like him, unheard, unseen. He wanted the light to reach them too. Within weeks, letters flooded in. Universities, tech companies, inventors. Each wanted a piece of him. He refused most offers, choosing instead to work quietly under Evelyn's foundation. Together, they built a small lab inside the old children's home. He taught the kids how to design, how to think in blueprints instead of pain. They called him Mr. Eli. He never spoke, but when he entered a room, the noise softened. The younger ones mimicked his gestures, hands shaping ideas, fingers dancing across paper. They didn't see his silence as weakness. They saw it as focus. One afternoon, a little girl with a hearing aid tugged at his sleeve. She held up a half-drawn lamp. "Mine doesn't work," she said. He smiled, knelt, and guided her hand, fixing the wire. The bulb glowed faintly. She gasped. "You made it listen." He wrote on her notebook. "It always was." The story spread online again. Photos of the mute inventor teaching children through sketches. People called him the voice of light. Donations poured in. The foundation grew. Soon other cities installed the kinetic grid. Every movement powered something brighter. But light has a shadow. Fame brought back ghosts. One evening, Evelyn entered the lab with a newspaper in hand. "He's back," she said. Paul Carter's face stared from the front page under the headline. "Father of Genius Breaks Silence." Eli froze. The article quoted Paul claiming partial rights to the invention, saying he'd supported his son's early experiments. Lawyers followed, letters arrived. Evelyn tore them up before Eli could read them, but he saw enough. He wrote, "He wants what the fire couldn't take." "We'll fight it," she promised. "You're not alone anymore." The case dragged for months. Reporters camped outside the home again. The media turned the story into a circus. Father versus son, creator versus ghost. Eli stopped going out. He stayed in the lab, hands trembling over blueprints. Every camera flash outside felt like lightning before a new fire. Then one night the city went dark again. A massive storm hit the power stations. Transformers failed. For hours the grid flickered, then shut down completely, except for one area. The same streets Eli had built still glowed faintly, powered by footsteps and wheels. Hospitals switched emergency lines to his system. Lives were saved. Evelyn's phone exploded with calls. "Your design just prevented a disaster," one official said. When she told Eli, he didn't smile. He simply walked outside into the rain, stood beneath the lights he'd built, and let the water run down his face. The lamps shimmered brighter with every step he took. Paul saw it too on live news. His voice broke on television. "That's my boy," he whispered, a confession too late for forgiveness. Days later, the lawsuit vanished. Paul withdrew his claim, left a single letter for Evelyn. "Tell him I finally see the light." Evelyn didn't show it to Eli until weeks later. When she did, he read it once, folded it, and set it on the table beside his notebook. Then he drew a single small circle, half in shadow, half in glow. Underneath he wrote, "Some people only see the light when it burns them." Months passed. The city recovered, brighter than ever. Eli expanded his designs into clean water systems, motion-powered heaters, silent turbines. His invention spread to shelters, orphanages, and war zones, places no one else looked. He never patented them under his name. Every blueprint carried only one signature: tomorrow. When journalists asked Evelyn who that was, she smiled. Someone who learned that silence can save more than noise ever could. At the foundation's first anniversary, the mayor unveiled a plaque downtown, dedicated to Eli Carter, the boy who lit the world. The crowd cheered, flashbulbs ignited, and the sky shimmered with the same light he once imagined in the ashes. Eli stood quietly behind them, away from the stage. He looked up at the lamps overhead, the way they blinked and breathed, each one alive because someone kept walking. Evelyn appeared beside him. "You did it," she said. He shook his head, writing his last note for the night. "We did it. The city spoke for me." As the lights rippled down the avenue like veins of gold, he finally understood what silence could become: language, legacy, and light. The invitation arrived folded in gold paper. Inside, embossed in silver letters, were the words: National Humanitarian Award, presented to Eli Carter, the voice of light. Evelyn Hart found him in the lab, hunched over a new design, something that looked like a generator shaped like a heart. "They want you to accept it in person," she said softly. "On live television." He looked up, eyes wary. "It's time," she said. He hesitated, then wrote on a small pad, "I don't like stages." "Stages aren't for you," she replied. "They're for the people who need to see what's possible." That night he didn't sleep. He sat by the window of his apartment, watching the city glow with his own inventions. Streets pulsed like arteries of gold. Motion lights flickered as taxis rolled by. He had built a living organism out of silence. And yet, deep down, a voice whispered that it all still began in fire and pain. The next evening, the auditorium overflowed. Politicians, scientists, reporters, all waiting for the man who had turned quiet into progress. When Eli walked on stage, the audience rose in applause. Cameras flashed like lightning storms. Evelyn stood off to the side, watching him face the world that once ignored him. The host handed him the award, a crystal sphere filled with light that shimmered at his touch. He held it carefully like something fragile. Then he turned to the microphone. The hall fell silent. He didn't speak. He couldn't. But that silence became louder than any speech. On the screen behind him, a projection began. A video showing his designs, his students, the orphaned kids building lamps, the streets glowing at night. At the end, his handwriting appeared in white letters. "Silence is not emptiness. It's where every idea begins." The crowd erupted. People cried. The applause seemed endless. Afterward, journalists crowded him. He smiled politely, wrote quick thank yous, but avoided long answers. Fame still felt like a cage, beautiful but locked. Later, as he stepped outside into the cool air, someone called his name. A voice he hadn't heard since the fire. "Eli." He froze. Paul Carter stood by the street lamp, older, smaller, hair gray at the edges. His hands shook, but his eyes burned with something softer than rage, remorse. Evelyn started toward them, but Eli raised a hand, signaling her to wait. Paul took a breath. "I know I have no right to be here. I just wanted to see you. One last time." Eli said nothing. He didn't have to. I read every article, Paul went on. Watched every interview. You built a world I never believed could exist. And his voice cracked. I tried to break you before you could build anything. I was wrong. Eli's gaze didn't waver. He studied the man who once called him a curse and now looked like one of the city's forgotten. Paul reached into his pocket and pulled out a small burned piece of paper, half a drawing, half ash. I found this in the rubble years ago. Couldn't throw it away. It was your first lamp design. Eli recognized the curved lines immediately, his handwriting blurred by smoke. He took it gently, eyes glistening. Paul swallowed hard. I don't expect forgiveness. I just wanted you to know you were never the curse. I was. Eli blinked away tears and wrote slowly. You taught me what not to become. Paul nodded. Then maybe I finally did one thing right. Evelyn stepped forward, her presence quiet but firm. You should go, she said softly. Let him keep his peace. Paul turned, hesitated, and whispered, I'll keep walking under your lights. Then he disappeared into the night. Eli stood there for a long moment, watching the man fade into shadow. He folded the burned paper, placed it inside his jacket, and walked to the corner where the newest lamp hummed. Its glow reflected in his eyes, steady and unbroken. The next morning, the world buzzed about his silent speech. Headlines read, The boy who spoke without words. Donations doubled. Schools requested his blueprints. The foundation expanded to new cities. Yet inside him something had shifted. Forgiveness wasn't a single act. It was a doorway quietly opening after years of locks. He poured himself into work again. The heart-shaped generator was finished within weeks. It pulsed softly, powered by rhythm instead of motion. He named it Pulse 1. When asked what it did, he wrote, It remembers that even stillness has energy. The device caught global attention. Hospitals used it during blackouts. Disaster zones lit up again. Eli didn't attend the ceremonies. He preferred to watch from rooftops, where silence had space to breathe. One evening, Evelyn found him there, sitting cross-legged beside a glowing prototype. You've built half the city already, she teased. He smiled and wrote, Only the visible half. She tilted her head. And the invisible? He wrote, That's where the real light lives. They sat together as the city pulsed below, a million footsteps fueling his dream. For a brief moment the skyline blinked, like a giant heartbeat synced with his own. Evelyn said, Your father may never deserve the light you gave him, but you deserve to forgive him. He nodded, watching the lamps shimmer across the river. His reflection in the glass tower opposite looked older, calmer. A man rebuilt from everything the world threw away. He took out his notebook, the one that survived the fire, and drew one final design. A lamp without wires, powered by touch alone. Beneath it he wrote, For those who reach out in the dark. The line trembled under his hand but didn't break. That night he dreamed of walking through the city barefoot. Every step he took lit another lamp, until the streets turned to gold. Somewhere in that endless glow, he heard his mother's voice again. Someday they'll see what you are. He woke smiling. Outside, dawn painted the horizon silver. The city of lights was no longer his invention. It was his reflection. The boy who couldn't speak had built a world that finally listened. The city glowed brighter than ever. But inside Eli Carter, there was a growing shadow. With every new invention, every headline, the world wanted more. Investors called. Politicians praised. Foundations asked for his next miracle. Yet all he wanted was quiet, the kind of peace that didn't need applause to exist. Evelyn noticed it first. You've stopped drawing, she said one night in the lab. He shook his head, scribbling, Too much noise. Even silence can get loud when the world starts listening, she said softly. Maybe it's time to choose what kind of voice you want to have. The question followed him everywhere. At interviews they called him a genius. At schools, children drew his lamps beside hearts and suns. Yet the weight of fame pressed heavier than any silence he'd known before. The turning point came at a board meeting for his foundation. Men in suits debated how to commercialize the kinetic grid overseas. If we license it, we can fund expansion, one argued. We could make billions. Eli wrote on the whiteboard, We built this to help, not to sell. A man across the table smirked. Philanthropy doesn't pay for satellites, Mr. Carter. Eli stared at him, then erased the board. Then maybe satellites aren't what the world needs. The room fell silent. Evelyn ended the meeting with a polite nod. Later, as they walked outside, she whispered, "You did the right thing." He wrote, "Sometimes the right thing costs everything." That night, he wandered through the streets alone. Neon signs reflected in puddles, their glow pulsing with the rhythm of footsteps. Every lamp, every shimmer was a reminder. His ideas had become something alive, but now they were being pulled by hands that didn't understand what they meant. He stopped at a corner cafe where one of his first lamps still hung. Inside, a family sat laughing under its light. The little boy's face reminded him of himself. Quiet, curious, unseen. The mother leaned over, whispering something that made the boy smile. It wasn't the kind of noise that hurt. It was the sound of love. He left without entering, heart aching with a piece he hadn't known he missed. When he returned to the lab, Evelyn was waiting. "There's an offer from the government," she said. "They want to buy the entire grid system. Global rollout. Full credit to you." He wrote, "At what price?" "They'll use it for cities and for defense." He paused, the pen hovering over the page. She continued quietly, "If you refuse, they'll build it anyway, with or without your consent. You have a chance to guide it, to make sure it's used right." He looked at her for a long time, then wrote, "You think light can be controlled by those who fear darkness?" She sighed. "Then what will you do?" He didn't answer. Instead, he opened his old notebook, the one that had survived the fire. The pages were worn thin, but the final sketch, the silent current, still glowed faintly under the lamplight. He ran his fingers over it, remembering the boy who drew it by hand while the world ignored him. The next morning, headlines blazed. Eli Carter refuses global licensing deal. Critics called him naive. Investors called him unstable. Online debates turned his silence into conspiracy. He ignored them all. 2 nights later, a storm swept through the city. Lightning arced across the skyline, plunging half the district into blackout again. But when the clouds cleared, the kinetic grid reignited on its own, each lamp glowing like a heartbeat. Eli watched from his window, rain tracing the glass. He wrote a single note on the page. "The world doesn't need my voice. Needs my choice." That choice came quietly. He called Evelyn and handed her a sealed envelope. Inside were legal documents transferring all patents, designs, and rights of his inventions to public domain. Anyone anywhere could use them, no profit, no permission needed. She stared at him, stunned. "You're giving it all away?" He wrote, "I never owned light. I only borrowed it." Her eyes filled. "You're freeing it. And yourself." He nodded. The announcement broke the internet. The boy who gave the world light trended for weeks. Some called it madness. Others called it grace. Cities began copying his systems. Villages powered lamps with bicycle pedals. Children built tiny versions in classrooms. Light spread faster than money ever could. But Eli stayed out of sight. He retreated to a small workshop by the river, far from the noise. There he built his last design. A simple handheld lantern, shaped like a heart, powered by touch. On its base he engraved the words, "For those still in the dark." Evelyn visited him one last time before her retirement. "They're naming an institute after you," she said. "You should come." He smiled, shook his head, and wrote, "I've already said everything I needed to." As she turned to leave, she paused. "You know, you changed the meaning of silence for everyone who thought it was weakness." He wrote, "Silence only breaks when someone listens." After she left, he stood by the window watching children on bicycles power street lamps along the riverbank. Each light blinked alive, chasing away the night. He lifted his lantern, pressed his hand to its surface. It glowed, faint but steady. He whispered, soundless but real, "Thank you." For a moment, the whole city flickered, as if answering him. Years later, people would still tell stories about the man who refused to sell the sun, the inventor who spoke without words. But those who truly knew him would remember something simpler. A boy who once had nothing but paper and pain, choosing to turn both into a world that could see. And when historians asked what his greatest invention was, the plaque beneath his final lantern read, "He turned rejection into energy, silence into power, and light into freedom." The world called him a genius. Eli Carter called himself a listener. Years passed after his final invention, the touch-powered lantern that spread across continents. He lived quietly by the Hudson River, in a small studio made of glass and steel, surrounded by machines that hummed like soft memories. Reporters called it the House of Light, but he called it home. Every morning began the same way. He would brew tea, sit by the wide window, and watch the city awaken under the lamps he once designed. Children rode bikes to school, their wheels charging the sidewalks. Vendors powered stalls with footsteps. The city breathed because he had once believed it could. He no longer sketched. His notebooks were full, his words written in the architecture of the skyline. Silence had done its work. Yet sometimes, late at night, he'd open one old book, the one scorched at the edges, and trace the marks left by fire. Beneath the burned lines, one phrase still shone: light that never dies. He smiled at it every time. Evelyn Hart visited less often now. Age had softened her stride, but her eyes still carried the spark of belief. On her last visit, she brought a group of students from the institute that bore his name. They wanted to meet the man who built tomorrow, she said. He greeted them with a nod, writing on his digital pad, "Tomorrow belongs to you now." One of the kids, a deaf girl named Lila, stepped forward holding a small invention, a miniature motion lamp shaped like a butterfly. It glowed when she waved her hand. "I made this from your design," she signed. Eli smiled, then wrote, "Then I made it for you before I ever met you." The room fell silent, the kind of silence that heals. After they left, Evelyn lingered by the door. "You know, they say your voice changed the world," she said. He wrote, "Funny. I never said a word." She smiled sadly. "You didn't need to." That night, after she was gone, he sat beside the river under the hum of the lamps. His reflection shimmered in the water, half light, half shadow. He took a deep breath and realized it sounded different. Fuller. Steadier. For years he'd accepted that sound would never be part of his life. But tonight, something inside him felt open. A soft wind brushed the window and a thought rose like a tide. What if silence had only been waiting? The next morning, the world woke to a quiet news alert. Eli Carter hospitalized after minor heart episode. Stable condition. Evelyn rushed to his bedside. The machines beeped in gentle rhythm, like the heart-shaped generator he once built. He opened his eyes, saw her tears, and wrote, "Don't worry. Still ticking." "You scared the light out of me," she whispered. He smiled. A week later, the doctors released him. They warned him to rest, but rest was never what made him alive. Instead, he spent his days walking through the neighborhoods lit by his inventions. People didn't always recognize him. He liked it that way. Watching them live beneath his light was the only reward he ever wanted. One evening, he wandered to an old part of town, the street where his childhood home once stood. The house was gone, replaced by apartments and a small park. But under a bench near the riverbank, one of his lamps still glowed faintly. He sat beside it, notebook on his knees, and wrote a single line: "This is where silence began." He thought of his mother's face, his father's anger, the nurse who once held him, the fire, the laughter of children who would never know his pain. He thought of all the versions of himself, the quiet boy, the dreamer, the ghost, the builder. For the first time he felt them all inside one body, one breath. The air shifted. A nearby family lit candles for a small vigil. A local blackout had dimmed the lamps for maintenance. Their children shivered in the dark. Eli reached into his bag and pulled out his handheld lantern. He pressed his palm to it. It glowed soft and golden. He handed it to the youngest child. She smiled. "It listens." He nodded, eyes wet. As she ran back to her parents, the light spread across their faces, chasing the dark away. He sat there until the lamps reignited, one by one. When they did, his body relaxed, his eyes drifting closed. The city shimmered, alive again. Evelyn found him there an hour later, peaceful, notebook open on his lap. On the final page, one sentence glowed in soft ink beneath a small sketch of a rising sun. "Silence gave me everything words could not." She pressed her hand to her mouth, tears falling as the nearby lantern flickered brighter, as if answering his last thought. The next morning the news spread quietly. Eli Carter, the boy who couldn't speak, dies peacefully at 42. The world mourned not with silence but with light. Cities dimmed their lamps for 60 seconds, then reignited them all at once, millions of sparks blooming across the globe in tribute. Evelyn attended the memorial. It wasn't held in a church or hall. It was outdoors under the city he built. Children carried paper lanterns that lit up with every heartbeat. On the main stage, a large screen displayed his handwriting. They tried to erase a life, but that life rewrote its meaning. The crowd whispered his name as the wind carried it down the streets he once walked. That night, far above the skyline, satellites captured an image of Earth from orbit. A glowing web of lights shaped uncannily like a heart. Evelyn smiled through tears when she saw it on the news. "You did it," she whispered. "You made the world listen." Back by the river, the last lantern he touched still burned. Its glow steady, defiant, alive. Inside its base, technicians later discovered a hidden note engraved in tiny letters. "Light doesn't speak. It shows." And so did he. The boy who couldn't speak had found his voice. Not in sound, but in everything he left behind.